Hi everybody, Jonathan Risto here, and thank you for joining me for another Metrics Monday. And today we're going to be talking about scan frequency. Yes, scan frequency is quite an important piece of information to us to understand, because how often are we actually checking the assets that are out there? Now, I know you're probably thinking to start with, hey, I've got agents. It scans regularly, constantly. Let's argue on an hourly basis even, which is great. Wonderful. We don't have to worry as much on scan frequency with those assets. But at the same time, we do have to worry about all the assets and devices in our environment that we can't put an agent on. There's lots of them out there. All of the networking elements we have. What are we doing actually for the operational technology components of our device, of our environments? Or even getting into things like multifunction printers. As well, what's actually going on for some of the things like maybe our serverless functions out there? How often are you checking those for problems? All items that we can't really stick the agents on, so understanding the risk associated with it from a frequency standpoint is definitely helpful. It factors into our risk decisions. Something else scan frequency helps with is from a compliancy perspective. What happens if you have compliancy requirements, regulations that state, hey, I need to actually check the assets regularly? Maybe they've defined a time frame for you. Maybe they are just staying inside there. Hey, I've got to worry about checking this on a regular basis. Calculating and understanding the scan frequency helps you show compliancy as well. Yes, we regularly scan for these, and this is how often it's happened over the past year. Helps you provide that evidence as components of it. Now, something else we don't often think about could be the resource allocation. Like say we're scanning something with our asset, with the scanner, doing a network-based scan on a daily basis. Well, do we need to do it that frequently for our asset? Maybe we could dial it back because of it's a low-risk asset in the environment, low need for any kind of asset data confidentiality requirements, and we have no compliancy. So do I need to scan it? Maybe I could reallocate some of the resources to actually look at something that needs it from a higher compliancy perspective. Lower the bandwidth utilization or the processing that has to happen on these devices. Not something we commonly think about with frequency, but as we look at our assets, maybe that could help identify I might be able to tune some stuff around, be able to change it a little bit, save some of the requirements and point it at other devices where it's needed for those scanners more frequently. So understanding that is helpful. And ultimately, it really does come down to the risk management of the entire environment. Understanding the scan frequency helps you know, are we checking this often enough for the risk profile that we have for this asset, for this class of assets, for this business unit, and the criticality of the assets? So lots of different things on the scan frequency perspective. Now let's take a quick look over here how we can do some calculations. This is by no means going to be exhaustive for it, but hopefully give you a little bit of a couple use cases, other factors that could help drive frequency components, and even how we can measure it. So let's flip over to the spreadsheet and do that. Here I've got a spreadsheet for them. There's lots of pieces of information in here. I've pulled out things like asset names and a bunch of other components that are not really relevant for our conversation here talking about frequency. But what we have is the criticality of the asset. So high, medium, low. Those will dictate our scan frequency requirements. If it's a high, or from a criticality perspective, if it's high, it needs a daily scan. If it's a medium criticality, it's a weekly scan. If it's a low, it's a monthly scan. I also have a compliancy requirement column in here. So if there is a compliancy requirement for that asset, it will require at least a weekly scan. Then take a look at what we have for our scan date. So I have various scan dates for where we've actually covered this off inside the environment as well. This is when various scanners have hit the systems in question. And then we have also that scan frequency column. So you can see that has been populated from the information we have. So as an example, I have a high critical asset with a compliancy requirement. The lower of those two would be daily. Medium without would be weekly. These two. Low without is a monthly. Then we've got a high without. It's still a daily because it's a criticality asset. A low with a compliancy requirement dictated we have to do this weekly. Medium with a compliancy, still weekly. And then we can see low with nothing in there, we still go back to monthly. So we just defined this out. Part of that is that I also did it just to do our color coding in here with conditional formatting we'll get to in a minute. Now, as I said, we have our scan dates here, all the different scan dates for when the assets have actually been hit. And what I've done is calculate for each of the for each of the scans, how long it's been from today to those scans. So you can see this first one, we have a value of 3. We've got 22 since a scan in December of last year. I've got 134 days even for this asset because it was last scanned in our September of last year. Now, what we're seeing here is I put on a little bit of conditional formatting, and hopefully this is all playing out right. But it's trying to highlight, at least for us, when we've seen a problem. So I just put conditional formatting on some of the columns. The rows in here for it. Yeah, this was supposed to be daily. It's been 3 days, flagged it off as red. This one's supposed to be weekly, but it's been 22 days since the scan. This one's supposed to be monthly as an example in row 12. It's been 13 days, so I'm in compliance and fine from that perspective. Now looking also down here at the scan frequency, I've calculated the average across all of these values for the total numbers we have out there. And we can see 32 days is the average scan frequency for these assets, but maybe that's not the best view. So I can see overall in the organization, not as helpful. But say, let's take a look across the assets that are supposed to have a daily scan. I can see the average for those is 2 days. Where that comes from is this value here with a 1 as well as a 3. The average number of that is 2. I'm still out of compliance, but showing the average scan for those assets. Our weekly numbers, similar. You take the values across that are assigned weekly compliances and scan it out. We can see we're averaging 11 days across all of those assets. 13 for the monthly, and the quarterlies are 59.83. Now, that's great to show compliancy perspective. But maybe you could do it also in here from a business unit standpoint to be able to highlight regardless of the assets, or maybe tying into the criticality assets. So we can see from the sales organization, the critical assets, the average scanned frequency on that would say be whatever it would be if we signed business units across all of these. And then you could do the same thing for engineering or various different groupings. Maybe you do it by operating system with critical asset on here. You can chop and slice the data up however you want. Lots of different ways, but to try and get that level of granularity for you to help highlight problems. Tying it down to the system owners would be great. Your critical assets, the scan frequency would be 7 days. Oh, we're way out of compliant. But with your medium and low items for the criticality, we are in compliance. Helps that business owner, specifically the assets relevant for them, we actually understand and see those values in here. So there's lots of ways we can group and chop and slice the data up. So there you have it, everybody. Scan frequency. Definitely a helpful metric for us to be looking at as part of our programs, helping understand the risk profile for the organization. Are we actually able to meet it from a compliancy requirement perspective, or even to help really understand the true risk, a business unit, a business owner, and the assets? Are we actually checking them as frequently as we need to? So, thanks again for joining for Metrics Monday. Tune in next time and we'll see what metric we'll talk about then. I'm Jonathan Risto. Enjoy the rest of your day.